Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. Um, Welcome to this very important meeting today. Just give a little introduction to today's talk. I'm glad that Kogidas Ramadas volunteered to do a very important topic, discuss a very important topic, demystify system change. Now, most of us as Sri Lankans woke up at Aragalaya time, and then people were asking, we need a system change. Something has gone wrong in the system, and we didn't know where it was wrong, what the root cause was. And it's very important for us to understand why it happened to us, and then how we should correct it. Then these are the important things we've been discussing. We've been getting somewhere, but I'm glad that someone who's been working in Sri Lanka for a long, long time and got wealth of experience is going to address this topic of system change. And welcome, Ram. He's called Ram. Kugidas Ram, that is normally
Yeah.
called Ram. Welcome, Kugidas. Thank you very much for coming in and talking about this. There are quite a lot of people who might want to ask questions from you as well at the end. I hope you are hearing okay from here.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm waiting
Can
for
you
you to
hear me?
talk. Yeah, it's
Okay.
you. Yeah, you can talk. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, Thank you, everyone. Uh, System change is something that got currency during the Aragalaya,
Yeah.
and it persisted for some time. But I don't hear much about system change anymore. And I have been dealing with systems, not governance system, but systems in general. Starting with in my first academic field of engineering, electronics. But I learned a lot of things from that one regarding systems. The 51 years ago, it was a project for me to design in electronics an amplifier. That was a project. Now, I went through so many books and journals, and I found a circuitry to produce that amplifier. In the 1970s, it was not chips, it was discrete components of transistors and resistors. So I wanted to get a very fancy circuit, and I got about a circuit with about 8 transistors and went and with the design to my lecturer, Professor Gunawardhan. He just dismissed the design in no time. And he said, do a modest one. I was really annoyed, but I can't help it. He's my professor, a grade one at that. So I went with it. Then I started designing and constructing. An amplifier system is made up of components of transistors and resistors. At that time, the electronics industry, electronic components were not reliable. If they give a specification, for example, 100 ohms resistor, when you buy from the manufacturer, a specific component could be either, it could be as low as 50 ohms or as high as 150 ohms. But the amplifier system I had to produce has to give a specified amplification factor. That's the first thing I first time I learned about systems. Systems are made up of components. The components will be unreliable generally. And electronics, it was inherently unreliable. But you should produce a system using those unreliable components, but the system has to be reliable. That is the challenge of designing, developing, and constructing or implementing a system. It is this concept of producing a system, a reliable system, using unreliable components is there in the multiple fields, not only in electronics, even taking it from engineering. We see a power system where we had to deliver power 24/7 to all the consumers. But the power system consists of unreliable components. The generator may fail at any time. The lines will fail at any time. You can't go and tell the consumer the components fail, therefore the system failed. Probably you can tell that in Sri Lanka. Electricity board does tell. Few months ago, they told us one line failed, and that's why the whole country went into dark for 3 hours. But that's not a proper system. That is something fundamentally wrong. I learned 51 years ago from my excellent Professor David Kumar. He was talking about the system in England managed by CEGB, where they keep on computer simulation on the reliability of the system. So if there's a single outage, will the power system fail? So they make sure, despite the unreliability of individual component, the system should be reliable. I have seen that in every aspect, every field of engineering. And I have seen that in accounting. Because all these, we are talking about engineers. We are talking about not people, but material. But when it comes to people, unreliability is even higher. But different professions have evolved means of ensuring system reliability despite the unreliability of the individual components that make up the system. In an accounting system, people who operate the accounting system are unreliable. Either may make big mistakes or they will intentionally make mistakes and with fraudulent intentions. But the accounting system should be reliable, that it will not allow or it will detect if somebody does that one and prevent it. In the accounting systems, we have segregation of duties and we have debit and credit should balance. Like that, we have numerous ways of ensuring the reliability. Even in computer system, its reliability is very low these days because people do not ensure reliability despite the unreliable hardware, software, people components. We can see that in Sri Lanka, in many of the computer systems. even in law, when you have a system of evidence, they make sure there are ways of ensuring reliability of the witnesses and the evidence, means of verifying it. When I was in the Syntech Law Committee, when we were discussing about admitting evidence in terms of reliability, they said computer evidence is hearsay, that it cannot be verified. Therefore, it was not accepted as in the court of law initially. But I remember working with ERSR Kumarasamy, who is an expert on evidence law. And we came up with making sure the computer evidence that is presented at the court is reliable, even though computer system may not be reliable. So therefore, when you want to build a system, always the computer system is, the components are unreliable, but the system should be reliable. Now, we should ensure that in the governance systems as well. If we don't ensure that governance system is reliable, despite the people who are elected to perform the governance are unreliable inherently, any human being can be easily become unreliable. The system should be such that the governance system, which should deliver the proper governance to the people, the benefits to the people, is reliable. But the last 76 years, we have seen Sri Lanka did not have a reliable system. The governance system will not deliver to people what they wanted. Now, there has been an attempt to change the system. Some were peaceful, like what happened but unsuccessful. What happened with resolving the ethnic issue between SJV Selvanayagam and Bandaranayaka, SV Selvanayagam and Dudley Senanayaka, there was an attempt to change. Whether it was reliable or not, I don't want to comment, but it failed. There were violent attempts to change the system. In the 1960 by a military coup, 1971 by JVP led by Rohana Vijayveera, and in the 1972 onwards by LTTE led by Prabhakar, and they were unsuccessful. But everybody felt there was a need for change. We did changes in the system. In the 1972, we changed the system. In my reckoning, it went from bad to worse. And from 72 to 78, we changed the system. But did it give reliable output to the people? It did not. We have to look at, now I hear most of the system change has been simplified, very extremely simplified. Removing the executive president will solve all the problem. But if you look at the history of 76 years, the worst laws were enacted under parliamentary system. You take the defranchising of the Indian labor, bringing the Sinhala Only Act, doing away with the independent commissions and politicizing the bureaucracy, removing the protection given to the minority, We were a secular constitution. We brought in religion into the constitution. And the irony of that is, it was brought by an architect who said, who come from a background that says religion is the opium of the people, Calvinari Silva. So all these things happen, and we nationalized the estates and ruined the estates. Not that nationalization was bad, but we ruined the estate because we didn't have the capability to manage the business, and we politicized it. All these happen under parliamentary system. And from the very parliamentary system, we brought in the presidential system. So what is the guarantee? Going back to the parliamentary system is the system change that we need, that will deliver what the governance system will deliver to the people. It is an oversimplification, because we are very good in finding instant, shabby solution. We don't think deep into this. Now, there are theories about how to deliver a governance system. A governance system should be such that even if an unreliable component, a rogue, gets into the parliamentary system, in the governance system, still he should not be able to do much damage. Our parliamentary system will work very well if the people who get into that are reliable. We don't have much difference between Singapore and ours in the parliamentary system. Singapore got Lee Kuan Yew, a statesman. The system, the country did well. We get rotten people into the system, and the country did bad. Which means the parliamentary system is not a reliable system. It will not give, irrespective of the people who make up the system being rogues or unreliable people, it won't deliver. But we need to deliver, have a governance system that will deliver to the people despite the bad people, rogue people, inefficient people getting into the system. How do we find that? What is the basic principle? I am not a lawyer. Even though I studied law as well for 1 year, I couldn't pursue that for various reasons. I went on search, turned to internet. I went on search on the internet looking for systems or philosophy or theory that will ensure a good governance system. I came across one such system written in 1748, named Spirit of the Laws. It was written by a Frenchman. You can see the name there, but I know only the last name. I know how to pronounce the last name. His name, he is Montaigne. It's a French, lot of words, letters are silent. He wrote a book named The Spirit of Laws. That was in 1748. Thanks to the internet, I was able to get at it. Its influence outside France was aided by the rapid translation into other languages. In 1750, an English translation was published. And in 1751, Roman Catholic Church added it to the list of prohibited books. Okay, it is no wonder. All right. Now, he enunciated a system that should be in place to give a reliable governance system. Okay? He said, in every government, there are three sorts of power: legislative, that is writing the rules of the country; executive, implementing the rules; judiciary, resolving dispute arising in the implementation of the rules. These three powers, he said, if it was in the same body, whether they are nobles or of average people, if they try to exercise more than one of three powers, that of enacting the laws, executing the resolutions, and trying the causes of individuals, it will not be a proper governance system. Okay, that is the basis on which he said the governance system should be there. Now, he said, furthermore, the executive power is better administered by one than by many. Okay, we see that in companies. A company is administered by a CEO, by one man. It is never administered by a board of directors. Board of directors are only policy decision, but the executing power is in one man. And also he said, on the other hand, whatever depends on the legislative power is oftentimes better regulated by many than a single person. Should the executive power be committed to a certain number of persons selected from the legislative body, okay, there would be an end of liberty by the reason two powers would be united. As the same reason, same person would sometimes possess and would be able to possess a share in both. Don't we see that in the last 76 years? That has been the case. In the Salisbury Constitution and in the Colvino de Silva Constitution, the total executive was part of the legislature. They were not independent. 275 years ago, one take forecast that one, because the executive power, the people who are the executive power, also shared the legislative power. What happens? In the case of JRJ Constitution, President was not part of it, but the cabinet was part of it. So, no wonder, starting from 1946, the executive power, the character of giving executive power, was used to twist the arms on the legislative body. And the executive did whatever they wanted in the legislature. The legislature was under the control of the executive. Initially, only the cabinet ministers. Today, you will see even the members of parliament get a budget to execute projects in their electorates. So, that executive power, shared with the legislature, made a mess of things for the last 76 years. And our politicians and everybody we want to go back to the same old way. And in fact, I asked this question from eminent lawyers, one of them politician, a president counsel. I asked him, this is what Montaigne said. Why don't we have an executive president and cabinet completely outside the parliament? The answer he gave was, it will not suit our culture. What an answer to come from a lawyer and an academic. Now, if you look at Sri Lanka, that is the basic problem we face. The executive and legislative power are in the hands of the same people, contradicting the theory of separation of powers enunciated by Montaigne. He predicted this 275 years ago, or from our constitution started 200 years ago. It might work when the people are good, as it has happened in Singapore. But will it happen otherwise? And he said, if the judiciary power were joined with the legislative, life and liberty of the subject would be exposed to arbitrary control. Didn't that happen with our Chief Justice Shirani Bandaranayaka? The legislature took the judicial power and tried the Chief Justice. So, if we want a system, we should have separation of powers. Now, this is a theory, and people might say it's just a theory. How do we know it will work? We have the best example in the world where it works for the last, I think, 200 odd years. I think it is 250 years, probably, closer to. That is United States Constitution. Even the Constitution Committee, there was 50 people. These were the founding fathers. George Washington, a John Adams, a lawyer. George Washington, a mathematics learned surveyor. Alexander Hamilton, lawyer and a banker. Benjamin Franklin, a scientist. John Lay, a lawyer. Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison. They, after 1787, winning the liberation war against the British with the help of French, followed the French and Montague's preparation of the US Constitution. You will see United States Constitution is as per the theory enunciated by Montaigne. It might be too much of exaggeration to say that's why United States is the most powerful country in the world. They had other reasons as well, but I am sure this is one of the most contributing factor. The behavior of United States outside their shores in other countries. If you look at today, when we look at Gaza, we can see how it behaves. But within the United States, the democracy is at best. There have been attempts there was a Watergate. In the recent past, Trump tried to mess it up, but he couldn't, because that constitution was founded on the principle of enunciated by Montaigne, and it works well. And United States Constitution went beyond simple separation of powers. They have horizontal and vertical separation of powers. What we talked about, legislature, executive, and judiciary, is known as horizontal separation of powers. But US 10 went vertical separation of powers. Horizontal separation of power means separation of powers of three organs of government, namely legislature, executive, and judiciary. They have vertical separation of powers, is that powers are distributed amongst levels of government, center, regional, local, based on area of government. And third factor they looked at, checks and balances, is the principle that each one of the branches has the power to limit or to check the other two, and this creates a balance between the three separate powers of the state. The checks and balances are very, very critical, and which is not in the Montague book, but they created it in the Constitution, those founding fathers. The different governments will control each other, and at the same time, each will be controlled. So they are doubly protected. So this is a proof of the pulling of Montague, how the separation of powers, independent of the type of people that form the governance, it will work well. If you look at 1776, they started, 77 they started, 78, and they implement in 79. We are, of course, always for instant solution. We don't spend time, think well, and formulate solution. We want it tomorrow. Whether it is taxes or whatever it is, we want it tomorrow. But this is what US Constitution was. And in 1778, US economy, US state of the people would not have been different from Sri Lanka right now. But they grew. As I said, among other factors, this would have been definitely a contributory factor. So, if we want to develop a governance system, if we want a system change for the good, we should base our principles, equality of citizens, horizontal separation of powers, vertical separation of power, implementing checks and balances. This has to be done in a system change. If we don't do this, we will be patching the solution, like in a building that is not with the proper structure, we keep on patching and we're patching still the system, the building won't be reliable. That's the same thing we will do. We have been doing this for last 76 years. We should make a break. Now, in 2018, a group of people in UPM, we sat down and put a skeleton. What could be a system change?
Roy.
Okay, I'll run down through that one. Hello? Hello? Yeah. Can I continue?
Please continue. There was an interference. I blocked
Okay.
it.
Okay. First of all, it has to be based on equality of citizen. Definition of state. Sri Lanka is a free sovereign state where equal rights of each and every citizen, independent of race, religion, is guaranteed by this constitution. And any law that confers advantages or places disadvantages based on race or religion shall be void. The second part is a modified form of the Salisbury Constitution 29-2. Official language. Official language of the state shall be Sinhala, Tamil, and in English. And the state organs will communicate with citizens in their language of choice. This has an implication. Every government servant should be bilingual so that he can work in any part of the country. We can communicate with any citizen of this country. Conflicts in the language of law. All laws in all three languages will be valid, and if there are discrepancies in a litigation between the state and the citizen, choice of the citizen will determine the language which is to be used, because the sovereignty is in the citizen. When a litigation between two parties, they could agree, and if there is a disagreement, judge may determine based on distribution. So the first principle that we want to have it in the Constitution. It's just a skeleton, not a full Constitution. The key elements. People elected legislature will review the legislation and budget either presented by the executive or their own, or will have the power to accept or reject them as laws. And they will not be part of the executive and cannot hold any government office. Executive power will be held by citizen elected executive who will choose his deputies. Judiciary representatives will be elected jointly by the executive and the legislature as stated under the checks and balances. Vertical separation of powers. Governance will be divided amongst the central government, regional council based on SWR's speech in Jaffna in July 1966, in Jaffna, and BC Pact of July 1957. Capital region, Mayaratta, Rajaratta, Ruhulu, and Northeastern. And the third level will be local bodies. Central government will handle finance, defense, external affairs, justice, infrastructure, air transport, sea transport, highways, and communication. Regional council will govern land and land utilization, law and order, industry, agriculture, transport other than air, sea, and highways, education, and health. Okay. I have heard from a lot of people that regional council devolution of power is waste of money and more corruption. But I have seen the corruption in central government much more than in the current provincial council. And also, the central government ministers do not hold on to the power, do not give away the devolved powers. They hold on to the power, ending up in large expenses. If it can be realized, it will be an ideal one to do. I had an experience when I went to Jaffna. There was a critical road that is required for the market in the Jaffna region between a place called Kodigamam and Point Peter, a 15-mile stretch, 15-kilometer stretch. But that road has to be constructed by the central government. When I asked the provincial council, why are they not doing it? Because there is the producers in Kodigamam can't go to the market in Point B to 15 kilometers away to sell their goods. The road is so bad, it's not usable at all. Then they said, no, it is not with us, it is with the center. That is why it is necessary to devolve so the people at the periphery know what exactly they want. People at Colombo do not know. If we rationalize, the expense will be much, much less. Now there is a duplication. There's a government agent in every area, and there's a chief provincial secretary. It's a absolute duplication of work because the central minister do not want to give away the power. The legislator, we should do away with the proportional representation because the party determines the members, not the public. We should go back, but there might be multi-member constituencies when a majority community with significant number of minority communities exists. We had that in the Salisbury Constitution. Term 4 years in rotation. Election 2 years for half the constituencies with no dissolution. The reason for this is to avoid changes at very fast. We've seen the majority in the legislature changing from one party 5-6 to another party 5-6 in the another term. This will cause a throttling effect so that every 2 years half the people in the legislature are changed. So the change will not be very drastic. Speaker elected every other year on a fixed date. The legislature will form into sectoral committees elected to review activities of each subject. For example, legislature will have a sectoral subcommittee consisting of major party and the minor parties, the members who will be responsible for a group will be for finance, another group will be for defense. Like that, they will become sectoral committees. We will see later what is the purpose of that one. Chief executive is president, elected by voting by the citizen, term 4 years. He will have choose 2 deputies and should be get more than 50% support either by second election between the first 2 or second preference specified. If the chief executive is impeached, incapacitated, died, first DTP assumes office. Ministers, president and deputy not responsible for any ministries, only for policies. Ministries are nominated by president, approved by the legislative sectoral committee after public hearing and can be challenged by any citizen in the Supreme Court. Predefined ministries. You can't be changing the ministries at the whims and fancies of the prime minister or cabinet or president in this way, because to buy legislative members, they do this one. We should have fixed ministries which cannot be changed: finance, defense, external affairs, justice, and infrastructure. The same thing applies to ministers in the regional councils as well. Election. All elections, central, regional, and local, will be held on the fixed date, maybe September 1st, with a cooling period to appoint ministers, senior positions in the government, and take over on the December 1st of every 4 years. Okay? We have talked about one earlier. Sorry, that's a repetition. Election for central, regional legislature and local bodies will be based on well-defined electorates, based on voting population of one member for every 100,000 or specified late area of council central legislature. That was the case in the Salisbury constitution, which will bring up to 150 members. And the regional council, it is 50,000, so it will be 300. Altogether, between regional council and central, there will be 450 members only. Checks and balances. Legislature will organize themselves into sectoral committees to study in detail the laws submitted by the executive. Any finance-related law, the finance sectoral committee will do. Any defense-related, the defense sectoral committee will do in the legislature. To review and approve nominations submitted by chief executive for ministers, judicial officers of the court, independent positions and independent commission, diplomatic heads, administrative heads, ministries and heads of government institutions. These reviews will be by public hearing, open to print and electronic web media. One of the key things that we are looking at, everything should be transparent. I have heard people saying independent commissions should approve the nomination. But what happens with independent commissions? I have seen, I have heard, when there was a public service commission, when I got out of the university, to get a job, there was political influence. I couldn't get a job in the places I wanted, even though I did well in my final exam because of political interference, and my name was right. I complained to the civil servant. The civil servant told me interference is there even with public service commission, because I call my colleague and say, my nephew is coming for an interview, look after him. And I have seen in the independent commission, I don't want to tell the name, in one of the commission, Human Rights Commission, one person was appointed by an independent commission member. That independent commission member belonged to a minority community, and he has to appoint a minority community person. And he appointed a person to the Human Rights Commission. He was a chemical engineer. And is he fit to be sitting in the commission on human rights? And when other members asked him, he has no clue whatsoever. He said, my uncle was in the independent commission, constitutional council. He told me that he will appoint me to the Human Rights Commission. So therefore, we should have a public hearing in which the people have to present themselves if we want a job. And that should be completely transparent. In the sectoral committees, there will be people from all parties. Therefore, it will be much transparency. Approval for appointments preferably must be unanimous, or in exceptional cases by 75% of the sectoral committee. This mechanism allows appointment to top posts are politically neutral, review function is distributed to maximum number of elected people, very transparent, and chances of this thing is very low. Changes to constitution should be ratified by 2/3 majority of the central and each one of the regional legislature. Finance for government will be based on taxes levied by each one of the levels of government. Right now, the central government gives money to the provincial council when they come with the begging bowl. It should not be the case. It happens two things. One is central government determines. Secondly, the provincial councils have no reason to develop the area. Even without developing the area, they can get money from the central government. Therefore, each level of government should be able to generate their own income, not with a begging bowl to another division. Judicial administration. All judges will serve until they are able to discharge their duties and cannot hold any office during service or after retirement. Right now, the judicial service people tend to be biased because they are looking for appointments after retirement. That should be done away with. Only one appeal. The citizens do not get their judiciary, their thing reviewed because appeal over appeal. We should limit it to one appeal, and there should be at least one appeal. In certain cases today, Supreme Court is the only court where you go and their decision is final. For example, fundamental rights case, Supreme Court decides. And these days is so funny. The Supreme Court will not even give leave to proceed with the case, even assigning reasons. And we can't do anything about it. That is a mockery of the justice. So the system should be changed. That there should be at least one appeal. All appeals except central government issues to be settled in the regional courts of appeal. A man from Jaffna cannot to come Colombo for an appeal. A man from Gaul cannot to come to Colombo for appeal. A man from Monaragala cannot come to Colombo for appeal. It should be settled in the region itself. All cases should be disposed within 3 months in appeals and in 6 months in the courts of first instance. This happens very well in Singapore. This will be facilitated by extended hours of hearing. Singapore courts sometimes hears till late night. Limited time for oral representation. Abolition of court cacation. We can't have cases going for years and years, 15 years, 20 years, indeterminate. Any judge who do not ensure this could be removed from the position. Strengthen the reconciliation process for minor cases, first by designated JPs and then by reconciliation board. Implement electronic system to improve efficiency of the case administration and criminal investigation. I think not only the court system, most of the things should be computerized. Otherwise, there will be less transparency. Now, we did it just for completeness sake, macroeconomic policy, reducing the government literature by cutting down the expense of the legislature and executive to acceptable level. We should make sure executive and legislature, even their remunerations are determined by the Public Service Commission and no increase during the current tenure. Reducing the government borrowing limit and renegotiate the terms of the loans, reducing the defense spending from 14% of the expense budget to 4%, reducing the government employees from 1.5 million to 400,000 by voluntary retirement scheme. All state-owned enterprises should be made profitable or by better independent management, or they should be sold or closed. Tax regime will be with very low indirect taxes. Now, you can have high indirect taxes in an affluent society, okay? Like the Nordic countries have 30%, 40% indirect taxes. But in a poverty, a lot of people living below poverty line, we can't have 18% indirect taxes. And we should have direct taxes like good old days. We had minimum 30% and maximum went to 65%. We should bring that to make an equitable distribution of income. Exchange management should be market determined so that there will be more incentives for exports. Expense incentives should be provided for local industries, especially people-based industries. These are some of the skeleton things based on Montague principles we prepare. This is just a skeleton and it needs to be worked and refined. But the most important thing is who is going to build the cat? What I mean by it, how are we going to implement this? Unless and otherwise, good people, without doing nothing, as Chula said, should participate in active politics and bring in the change in the landscape of the political landscape of this country and active participation and come to power and implement these changes. Because you cannot expect any one of the existing political parties, whether it is UNB, SLPP, SJB, or NPP, will ever want to change. Okay, they will want to do away with the executive president, but it will be no different. There will be an executive prime minister who will behave the same way executive president will behave. Okay, that's my humble opinion. Thank you for listening to me. All right. Shula, it's yours.
Yes.
I don't know whether you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah, thank you.
Yes. Now, there was a...
Ram, I just have to congratulate you for doing such a wonderful talk. I think you have to stop sharing your slides. Yeah, great. So it's been fantastic talking about your experience and sharing all your experience with us. I just get this to work. First of all, something went wrong with me. Just a second. Yeah, I had to take you out over there. Just a second. Right. Okay, so it was fantastic, Ram, because now I think there's lots of people here who are junior maybe, but something that you need to focus is that in Sri Lanka itself, how come we got so much information and talent that is not surfacing? That's one thing that you will